Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists. Chasing the Horizon is brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, and you can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes or by going to our website at bmwmoa.org/podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Wes Fleming, and this is Chasing the Horizon. We're going to start each of these podcasts with a little bit of industry news. So for the news for this episode, this debut episode of Chasing the Horizon, we've got info about CARB, Ducati, Indian, Harley Davidson, and a little bit more. In California, the California Air Resources Board, which is better known by its acronym CARB, held meetings with reps from Kawasaki, KTM, Beta USA, and some other manufacturers to talk about off-road riding and the community's concerns about the current red or green sticker program that could spell disaster for off-road and trail riders, as well as motocross markets throughout the country. CARB did a 2-year study of off-road riders in California and concluded that their red sticker program isn't being used as it was intended, so they want to shut down the program. Their main complaint was that the competition exemption is being misused by being overused, and therefore there's no point in continuing the program. This is important because even though its regulatory power only covers California, when CARB makes a decision that affects manufacturers, they tend to spread that decision over all of their machines, parts, and accessories that they make or import into the United States. It makes things easier for them. So ending this red sticker program could affect a lot of the things that we put on our motorcycles, not just off-road motorcycles, but sooner or later on-road motorcycles as well. Ducati is in the news lately because Volkswagen AG, the company that owns Ducati, put the word on the street that they're looking to sell the iconic Italian motorcycle brand. It's safe to say that their $1.2 billion valuation came in part from the company's 2016 revenues, which topped 730 million euros, which at the time I'm recording this is about 865 million US dollars. Harley Davidson was apparently interested early on, but perhaps due to their disastrous and costly turn with MV Agusta a few years back, they pulled out of the running. Polaris, which owns Indian Motorcycles and closed down Victory Motorcycles earlier this year, has expressed some interest, as have the buyout kings at Bain Capital. Don't discount interest from the Asian markets, though, as the motorcycle market in India and other places in Asia is growing fast, and a lot of those companies are hungry for legitimacy and technology from Western markets. Don't forget what happened to Eric Buell, though, when India's Hero MotoCorp pulled their funding and walked off with a significant amount of Buell's technology. That spelled doom for Buell's rebirth after Harley so ignominiously dropped him. Maybe Royal Enfield will make a bid, or some other private equity fund like CVC Capital Partners. They've shown some interest, and there's some other interest here and there. In World Superbike news, Red Bull Honda continues to search for a rider to replace Nicky Hayden, who was killed in a bicycle versus car collision in Italy back in May. Moto America rider Jake Gagne's name has been mentioned more than once, but former factory Ducati World Superbike rider David Giuliano is expected to test Hayden's CBR 1000RR SP2 motorcycle in Germany at the Lausitz Ring. Giuliano has been racing on a BMW S1000RR for Tyco in the British Superbike Series, but he left that team after missing 3 rounds due to a back injury he sustained during a race at Brands Hatch in April. While we'll be doing our best on Chasing the Horizon to stay away from politics, news is news. And in the news recently is the cancellation of a $3 million fine levied against Harley Davidson by the Obama administration. The Trump administration canceled the fine, which was meant to fund an anti-pollution program in the American Northwest. And that $3 million was tacked onto a $12 million fine that was leveled on Harley for its Screaming Eagle tuning kits that didn't meet federal environmental standards. Harley still has to pay the $12 million though, even though they don't have to pay this $3 million. Indian Motorcycles has put out a bobber version of their Scout, following up on Triumph's cool-looking Bonneville bobber that has been selling really well. The Scout Bobber sports 100 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque coming from their standard water-cooled 1133cc Scout V-twin. Of course, when they talk about it, they call it 69 cubic inches. The main difference between the stock Scout and the new Bobber are cosmetic. The Bobber is lower to the ground, has a more aggressive riding position, and it has a lot of updated styling cues to match the more aggressive attitude of the bike. It even ships with what look like dual sport tires, which could be interesting. Pricing on that's going to start at $11,500, but of course it goes up the more accessories you add on to the bike. You can get it in any color you like too, as long as that color's black. Check out cyclenews.com for more motorcycle industry news, and we'll do our best to bring you the most interesting tidbits from what's circulating out there in the world and on the internet. Cycle News publishes daily on their website and has a weekly news magazine available through their website at cyclenews.com. Wrapping up the news brings us to the interview segment in our debut episode, and our interview here is with Helge Pedersen, who runs a motorcycle tour and media company called Globe Riders. Helge sat down with me during the MOA's annual summer rally, which was held this year in Salt Lake City, Utah. I have to apologize for the high noise floor during the interview, as we weren't lucky enough to find a soundproof room that we could sit in and talk. So the interview that we've got lined up for this episode of the podcast is with Helge Pedersen, who is a widely renowned world traveler, one of the first people that I was ever aware of that was a world traveler. I was introduced to his exploits through his book, 10 Years on Two Wheels, which is a fantastic book, stunning photography, great stories, and all that kind of stuff. To me, your book is kind of the photographic equivalent of Jupiter's Travels from that literary standpoint. Those two books are kind of the pinnacle of the travelogue for me. So I just want to welcome you to the podcast. It's nice to meet you finally after all these years. I feel like I know you, even though we never met until yesterday.
I heard about you, Wes. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, great. So I know that Globe Riders is your touring company, and that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I want to talk about your history with motorcycles. You know, that's why we're here. We all love motorcycles, which is how we can get 4,000 or 5,000 people in one place for a week in the hot sun to sit around and talk about motorcycles. So I'm interested to find out what your very first motorcycle that you ever owned was.
Well, I had Ish 49, which is a Russian two-stroke bike. It was similar to a DKV from East Germany in the old days, but it's a two-stroke. It had one seat low, where we were sitting, and the passenger would sit high up on the springy seat, and a girl will hug you around your neck when she was sitting there, and a gear shifter on the tank.
Oh.
It was a disaster of a bike. I tried my best, but I restored it. I had learned a lot mechanics, and then I went on to, I would call my real first bike was a Suzuki TT 500 two-stroke.
And what are you riding now?
I have a 1200 GSA 2015.
Okay, so you got a water-cooled.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic engines on those things.
I have had every GS since they came out in 1981 on the market in Norway, at least. I know they came out in 1980, but that was only Germany. We couldn't get our hands on it, and I was going to go to Africa. I thought, I hope they come out. The next year they came. Since then, I've had every generation of the GSs. And to be honest, every generation has gotten better. Which one I love the best is the one I have today.
There you go.
It's really, the water cooler is good.
And where are you living now?
I live just outside Seattle in Washington State, beautiful northwest, similar to Norway in many ways, and I love it there. It's a good place.
Now, I've always kind of assumed that Norway is, the frigid north. I wouldn't think of the climate being similar to Seattle.
Oh, no. You're right, because Norway is very long.
Yeah.
I come from Kristiansand, which is in very bottom of Norway, and very similar to Seattle. We get a little more snow, perhaps, but it's the coast. It's the climate is very.
Yeah,
similar.
and the ocean kind of evens things out.
It does
quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I know you run a touring company, and that's got to be a huge strain on your time. But do you get much time to ride these days?
Well, the thing is, people say, did you ride here? No, I'm on my Volkswagen, the second car I ever owned in my life, a van, because I need to hold books and having a boot and stuff here. And to be honest, I wouldn't have had a bike because my bike is now on the way to China. I'm going to the Himalayas in September. It's in a container, probably sitting in Shanghai, sweating it out like we are here.
Yeah.
And I sold the other 2013 Watercool, and I have 2 crashed bikes that I'm building up to a sidecar bike now. So right now I don't have a rideable bike, but it's for practical reasons. But to elaborate on what you are saying, are you riding now? Seriously, when I'm home, I don't ride too much because I'm on the road every year, 5 to 6 months. I like to go hiking in the mountains. I'm taking up sea kayaking where I live, right by the ocean. I go sea kayaking. I like the outdoors altogether. But when people ask me, hey, you want to go for a single track up in the Cascades, and they have a 250 or something to borrow, I will take them up on it. I love motorcycling.
All day long.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so is that the kind of riding that you like to do when you have the chances to get off the roads and get into the woods a little bit? And yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of opportunity to do that in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a good forested state. I mean, Seattle is built up. It's a big city. There's a lot of development there, but I don't imagine it takes too long to get to roads that are fun.
Oh, no. And, you know, I live in the city of Tour Attack, USA, and they're really good friends of mine. And I was on the first team with Sterling and the Tour Attack guys, and we were filming doing the Washington Backcountry Discovery Road. And that's how it all started out. I was a photographer on the project. And, you know, it just opens up your mind when you do the backcountry discovery tours for what's right in your backyard. I love to go to Himalayas. I love to go to Africa, South America. But, you know, there are no excuse if you can't go there. Or even if you go there, you should also go in the back countries here. You can go the rest of your life. You will not cover all the roads here in North America.
Yes,
so beautiful.
Absolutely true.
Really, really.
And I've been following the BDR series, even though I've never done any of the rides. And I'm very excited to find out that they're coming to my part of the country. I live in Virginia, and they're going to be doing one that goes from Pennsylvania to North Carolina.
Oh, cool.
So I'm very excited about that because there's a really good chance they're going to be touching on some roads and some towns and some places that I know pretty well.
Yeah.
So that'll be a good adventure when they get that. And we actually had Paul from Tour Tech USA on a previous episode. So we had a great conversation with him. He's just really excited about the BDR series, and that's fantastic.
I think they are doing a big favor to the GS community. You're getting a lot of people out there, and that's great. Wonderful.
Yeah, and you know the whole adventure bike segment has just exploded since the last 10 years.
Oh yeah.
It used to be the GS was the only one. There used to be the old Africa Twin. Was kind of that outlier that not many people knew about, and the new Africa Twin is jumping back into the market with huge competition now.
Oh yeah.
Where they didn't used to have any competition.
And that's good for all of us, because all of the manufacturers have to, be more creative. And who's benefiting? We are. Well, the Visa card is suffering a little bit.
Yeah, the bank account always takes the hit, doesn't it?
But
so you said you're out riding, traveling 5 to 6 months a year.
Yes.
How does Globe Riders fit into your traveling schedule, your touring schedule?
Well, to say it like this, Globe Rider is my baby. That's my life. My father passed away at 61. I'm 62 now. And I decided very long time ago, and I started Globe Rider in 1998. I did the first tour in 2000. So we have done this for 17 years now. So I said, I want to run this tour company. And by the way, I would like to mention too that Skip Mascoro from Pancho Villa Motor Tours, which now is Motor Discovery, it's all his fault, okay? We blame him on all of this. But it was an honor that he took me in and he wanted to teach me about this. I helped him in South America. One thing led to another. And I decided I wanted my own company, specializing in long distance touring with your own bike. That's the key. We do 65, 70 days tours. I just did Cape to Cairo. I'm on my way now in September to Himalayas, going to Tibet, base camp of Everest, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, ending in Bangkok 65 days later. So my traveling is with Globe Riders. That's when I'm out and I'm in the best space in my life. I'm a photographer as a background. and that's my big passion besides motorcycling.
And what I'm just curious, what kind of photography gear do you use?
Too much. It's called an addiction.
Yeah.
And there are no 12-step program for it. No, really. If you saw, we talk about packing bikes and stuff, and I think it's a sickness among all of us that go traveling. We take too much junk with us.
We do.
Well, my junk is photography. So I have a big SLR. And again, I want to make sure that everybody understands. I use Canon. I don't care if you use the Nikon, Pentax, Sony. They're all good. It's much more about the photographer. But I chose many years ago to go with Canon, so I have a lot of investment in glass, meaning lenses. And my advice to anybody, spend your money in lenses. Every year there's going to come new cameras that you can attach to that lenses if you choose that way. So I have big SLR cameras, and I can also take video with that. So I do some of the video. I usually have 2 camera bodies, because when I'm out taking pictures, it's dusty and terrible. And I have 24-70 millimeter on one camera and a 70-200 all 2.8 lenses, fast lenses. I don't need to change. I can be fast, take picture of wildlife, take picture of bikes, whatever. So I have that in a camera bag sitting where the passenger is, because I never have a passenger with me. And it's a Love Pro bag. And if you want to see how I set it up, just to go to Globe Riders and look under articles, and there's some video and stuff about how I set up my camera here.
Oh, great.
But it's a good place to carry it, because it has the back of the backpack have padding, and I strap it down there, and it's a good place for it to sit and jump up and down. And I have a dust cover, a rain cover.
Yeah, and you're not wearing it, so
never wear.
If you should have some kind of a get off, you don't have to worry about crunching your gear between you and the ground.
Yeah, and if I had something on my body, which I had a waterproof camera on my chest once, and I fell on the way to Tierra del Fuego many years ago. I cracked or broke, I don't know till today, but nobody could tell me a joke, or I couldn't sneeze for weeks because broken ribs, all that is.
Yeah.
So I try never to wear anything in my riding gear.
And it also helps keep you more nimble. It keeps your center of gravity what you're used to without a backpack or anything like that on.
I don't need that.
So I'm kind of I get into hardware, and I'm an amateur photographer. I'd like to fancy myself. How did you handle the transition from film to digital? Because I know that you've been doing this long enough, since the early 80s, that when you first started out, it was all film. There was no digital. And now in 2017, it's almost all digital. It's really hard to do film. So how did you manage that transition?
I always been what we call a geek. I didn't see a computer before I finished my tour. But my publisher, when I published 10 years on Two Wheels in Norway, they gave me a computer, a Macintosh 145B with that little roll ball on there, black and white, and the disc. But so already when they came out with the first digital camera, I was skeptical like everybody else. But I also saw, I think this looked like it's the future. And when we produced the first Iceland movie, Sterling, Chris, and me, I had the first digital SLR camera from Canon, and I remember I shot in RAW format from the beginning. I really didn't understand what it was, because I knew JPEGs, but I also understood that was a lesser thing, but RAW was something fancy, but I could choose both, so I just stored it. And that has been my philosophy many times. Not always understand what's going on with this technology, but just go for the highest megapixels, the best. And people say, I don't need high megapixel. Yeah, you do. If you're going to crop that elephant and take away 75% of the picture because you didn't have the telephoto lens with you, it was nice to have 32 megapixel camera and so on. So to answer your question, I got into the game very early, and I never looked back. Sure, I have tens of thousands of slides, and I have a scanner, and in dark winter nights up in Seattle, I sit there and scan, and I have probably up to close to 30,000 scans.
Wow.
But in my computer, I have over 400,000 digital pictures in my database in Lightroom right now.
Yeah, I kind of miss shooting with slide film because of just the the depth and the richness of the color. And I feel like in the last few years, the digital technology has finally caught up to where, or at least my perception of it has finally caught up to where I look at my images now and I can see very little difference between, images I made 20 or 25 years ago with slide film. I'm one of those people, just like you. I tend to haul around more stuff than I really need, and you kind of get used to being able to reach over and grab that extra lens and throw it in your bag and get down the road. But it's hard sometimes, I think, to leave tools behind that you're concerned you might need.
That's the key.
But certainly, your advice about putting your money into the lenses is really great, because you can always, as long as you stay with one system, whether it's Canon or Nikon or Sony or whatever, as long as you commit yourself to staying with that system and their lenses, you can always upgrade your body. And still you have the same lenses that you're used to, the feel and the weight and the function, so that's really cool. Also from a technology standpoint, when you made your trip, the internet wasn't a thing. There was no social media, there was no email, there was no, if you wanted to let somebody know how you were, you had to spend a ton of money and call them or send them a postcard that they would get 3 weeks after you left where you sent it from. So how do you kind of navigate those kinds of technological changes and the expectations that kind of come along with them as a well-known world traveler?
Well, I had it out from Norway. I was 27 years young at that time. That was 1982. I'm 62 now. And, excuse me. So, of course, if you were going to communicate, like you say, it was by mail. One way to communicate at that time, have you heard about poste restante?
No.
Okay, so I would give my parents or my friends, say, you can send me a letter to Malawi head office in Lilongwe. That's how you write it. Poste restante, care of attention Helge Pedersen. They had a place on the post office, a box. When it said poste restante, they didn't even look who it was, they just threw it in there. You come there, present your passport. They look through if there was something from you, and you can prove that it was you with your passport. You got the mail. So you got mail at different places, but it took months in between. And if it was an emergency, like I broke a fork on my R80 TS in Malawi, I sent a telex up to Norway to the BMW, and they got it from Germany and blah, blah. 1.5 months later, I had the spare part. Yeehaw.
6 weeks.
I'm not kidding you. And the funny part was it disappeared inland in Malawi. It was sitting on the wrong shelf at the airport. But that's another story. But to talk a little about what you are saying, because I think what I see today, and I feel a little for the younger generation that's out traveling, all the pressure going on Facebook, going on Twitter, Instagram, it feels like a burden to the travelers. I think in many cases it takes away from the joy and the experience. I see it in a smaller scale on our tours. Customers or riders that come with us, they have to post something at night, and they don't get the chance to do other thing or just take in the experience. So sometimes I think it's good to take a step back from technology. I do it many times myself. I kind of remind myself, and I have a Leica camera just to draw a comparison with the super fast 12 picture per second Canon autofocus, and this. The Leica is manual focus, everything. Just get back into the manual with a rangefinder camera. It's just put you in another space. Another comparison there, if I may, it was in Japan, in Hokkaido. I met this, he's a carver, nationally known, carved beautiful sceneries, auto trunks and stuff, and just fantastic thing. And I met him because of motorcycling. He had a R100 RS, and I said, wow, that's a cool bike. And then he had a Harley. So what he told me was, I said, why do you have these two different bikes? He said, When I'm frustrated, fight with my wife or something bad in the business, I jump on the RS and I get all that energy out of me. If I want inspiration, I jump on the Harley and I just sit there and I get the inspiration in. Sometimes I think you have to step back from technology and just smell the roses or whatever you say.
I think it can be difficult because in our modern culture there is a lot of pressure to be on social media and to kind of track your life and keep up with people, and it can be a tremendous amount of pressure and tough to deal with. And just walking around of course we're talking during the MOA's national rally at Salt Lake City in mid-July. This podcast probably won't come out until later in the year. But even just walking around the rally grounds, you see people head down, fingers out, thumbing away at their phones. The upside is we see some fantastic images on Facebook that in the Facebook group that show all the fun that people are having and all the people that they're meeting. And I love to see pictures on social media of smiling faces, people having a good time. Even if they're crammed into a helmet, you can see the smile in their eyes. So do you try to encourage the people that are traveling with you on those tours to, I guess I should rephrase that, how would you encourage people to kind of take a step back from that day-to-day intensity of keeping up and take that advice to enjoy the scenery and smell the roses and get on with be where they are when they're there?
Well, first of all, Globe Riders, we have a journal. In September, I will be in the Himalayas. So if you log on there and click on the journal, I will have a InReach, the deal that's sending up a ping, updating the map. You can see every 20 minutes where we are. So we try to stay with the technology because, again, it has like you just mentioned, a lot of positive things. Family want to know where are they. They can just log on and see, the group is moving there. Yeah, they arrived there and there. People have the InReach, or they just send a message for the wives to know, I've reached the hotel. And it goes by satellite. It works everywhere. But I see when we get outside of reach of cell phone and stuff, people sit more around the campfire and talk at night and stuff. So you have to have a healthy attitude toward this. I totally agree. It's fantastic when people can share their experiences. I got people coming up to the booth. I read about you, blah, blah, blah. Can we take a picture together? And they post it. What better to be a good ambassador for encouraging other people to travel and go out in the world and do something with motorcycling?
Yeah,
it's just that sometimes it feels like, I only have 5,000 likes. How many likes do you have? And so are you lesser if you have that and stuff? So it's get into that kind of a deal. And like Paul Gillian, and all respect from him, is the best guy ever at Tour Attack. And he teased me the other day, Helge, my dog has more Instagram following than you. You have one picture and 7 followers. So I immediately got on with it, got a bunch of pictures. His dog is still way ahead of me. So I'm working on it.
Well, everybody loves dogs, You can't. There's a couple of guys that are here with their dogs in sidecars.
I love that. I've met them.
They just stop traffic. And one of them I am connected with on Facebook, and he just loves dogs and takes his oldest dog with him just everywhere he goes, and it's really fun to see all the pictures.
It is. It's a good way of sharing your journey. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you finish your sidecar rig, you're kind of obligated to get a dog to put in it.
I think that's a good idea because I never had a dog in my life, and I love dogs. For some reason, most of the times the dog love me. You go down and talk. And I got so many dog fixes here at our booth. I have a water. First thing when I put up the booth, I had a water thing there because we invite dogs over and I can get my little fix and stuff.
There you go.
But the traveling I'm doing, it's very difficult because of the international borders and stuff. So it has to wait. But it's nothing more happy to see a dog in a sidecar with his thong and his smelling. And he's just happier than a clam.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions about the kind of traveling that you're known for. See, I'm kind of
homebody. I might go out on the road for a week or 2 weeks, or even, a cross-country trip for a month or so.
Yeah.
I've done that a couple of times in the past. I've done some longer rides, but I always had the end goal of going back home and being back home on a specific date or by a specific date. Mm-hmm. And you set out on a journey that you think is going to maybe take 6 or 8 months, or maybe a year, and 10 years later, mm-hmm. You finally wrap up this journey. What would you encourage people to do to make that leap, to be able to, kind of separate from their stuff and experience the world on a motorcycle?
Well, the way it started with me was blame it on National Geographic magazine. My father got it. His English was good. As a kid, I didn't understand this language called English. Still have problems.
You do just fine.
Thanks. But I was attracted to the pictures. And that was kind of the nighttime stories. I'd sit with my father, and he would translate and say, "What do you think about that picture? What do you think about?" And I got into this spirit of adventure. And I think that's where it came. And then I was an exchange student in Los Angeles for 1 year. I was 17 years old, AFS, American Field Service, sent over to live for 1 year. And that kind of opened the world to me. Wow, I could be away from my culture and introduced to a new culture. Got a little more, more secure with myself, I think, when it comes. And then when I took off, it was a pretty big leap, because I sold everything I owned. I finished my contract with the Rescue Helicopter Service in Norway as a photographer. Talked to some magazine, can I write for you? Can I have a contract? They say, no contract, but we will buy your stuff, it's good. And I worked for 10 years for one of them. And I just headed off from Africa. And it was scary like heck sometimes. And then it was thrilling, and then it was scaring. I crossed the biggest Sahara desert in the world, the Sahara Desert. First day I broke my shock absorber. I had to turn around and build a double monoshock on that R80 GS, and then made it through. Spent 2 years through Africa, and I was not out there to conquer the world. I just want to see some of Africa. And then I understand, hey, I can make a living on that. Not good living, but enough to support a guy in a little green tent, some sardines, rice, new tires, gasoline. But my biggest mistake was that I was gone for 10 years. I was 2 times back in Norway. 5 years was the longest I was gone. I didn't have money to go back, and it was a different time then. The way I would advise anybody today, and I get a lot of email, I talk to a lot of people and encourage them to do it, take it in smaller portion. Don't say that you're going to conquer the whole world, because after a while, I think you go into autopilot, and it becomes just the next normal. And I got caught in that. And I had to really think hard about it. I felt like I was a satellite almost going in orbit. And it was not more the challenge. I didn't have time to absorb all of the experiences. So take smaller tours, and for some people they are just probably rolling their eyes now. I say, take smaller tours, just go to Tierra del Fuego in 6 months or a year. But I wouldn't just go and go and go. That takes a very special person to stay sober through that. And a little story there, I met this guy many, many years ago. He was a Swiss backpacker and really liked him. He's been everywhere and we talked and stuff. 5 years later, I meet him again, just by chance in Malaysia. At that time, he was getting a little weird, because he had been on the road for 15 years or something, like a long time, longer than me. And he just had this glaze on him. And then I thought about it, and I will say, I don't want to be like that. I think it was 10 more years later, I met him again. Can you believe that? In a little village, and again in Malaysia, of all places. But we were filming the Indochina project with Sterling and Chris, and they said, that's a weird guy. And he was just walking around, and he was like a zombie. He didn't know anything else in life. And so he has been my mentor and the reminder of, like you said, you like it at home. I love it at home. I got a base now. I don't want to give up on having a base. I love it up in the Northwest. I go kayaking at home, hiking at home when I'm not out riding. and I work on spreadsheet and preparing for next globe others too.
Yeah.
I'm very privileged, but that would be my advice for anybody. Take it in smaller increments.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and it gives me a lot to think about. You know, usually my biggest concern, the excuse that I use for not doing it is, well, you know, I have a kid. I can't leave while my kid's growing up.
Yeah.
Well, she's going to be out of high school in a few years, and then, well, maybe I need to be home while she's in college, just in case she needs me. Well, then she's going to be in college, out of college, and starting her own life, and I'm going to run out of excuses.
Grandchildren.
Let's not hope very soon. Although, you know, I'm almost 50 years old, and I have friends from high school that have been grandparents for 5 or 10 years already. And you know, I can see there's a little change in mentality, you know, when you have that extended family and you develop those feelings of responsibility and all those kinds of things. But I've really enjoyed the 2 cross-country journeys that I've taken in the last, well, now it's been 20 years, you know, but it's just one of those things, and especially traveling with somebody that you trust on the road with you on another motorcycle is one of the things that I like, because you know, the last time I went cross country was before social media. We had email, but it was really before social media. So I was able to keep in touch with my family and even, unfortunately, my boss at the time. But you know, having my buddy along with me, you know, we could sit in the evening over dinner or a couple of beers and kind of talk about the things that we saw that day and just kind of experience that. You know, we didn't think to keep a journal, and you know, we never wrote a book, and so I'd be interested to hear your perspective on traveling alone versus traveling with other people.
Yeah, I've seen both of it, and these days I'm more like you. I like to travel with people, but I took off. I wanted to do it by myself, and I think it has great advantages to do it alone. And the reason is you're on the road, stopping into a restaurant to have something to eat. You come in there, you see the bike, you see the guy. If you had 2 Norwegians there yachting along, that's a strange language, and you probably might not want to disturb them, or just seeing them having a good time. But then you see this lonely fellow, you kind of feel, it could be nice to talk to. So that way, I felt I got really easy in contact with people. Wherever I traveled, South America or Africa, it was easy to be invited in to stay with families. You could handle one. But then if you introduce 2 people, then it's a little more complicated. And also you isolate yourself more because of the language.
Yeah.
Not say that that's a bad thing.
It's
because
just different.
It's different. It's different experience. I read a book by Hjalte Tin and Tina Rasmussen. It's a Danish couple, and they were my heroes growing up, or not growing up, but while I started traveling. They got a Volkswagen bus from New York to LA. Then they bought 2 XT500s, 2 of them, zero riding, hero riding. They had a kid, 1.5 and 3 years old. They made a little seat kind of by the tank and took off. They really, I think they did it the right way from the beginning, because they were out for a year or so, come back, they wrote a book about it, they made multimedia shows, traveled around, but they got time to absorb all of what they've done. And I read their books, and I went some of their same places, and I said, this is not what I see. But they were with kids. They saw it through their kids, because families, they was very inviting. Oh, your blue-eyed Danish blonde kid, you know, invited in, and they had an incredible experience. I was the man there out with my bike. I met more the macho guys, or I was alone taken in for different reasons and had different experience. Not saying one is wrong and one is right. It was just so neat to see. And they had traveled, unfortunately they don't have books in English, they have in German and Danish, but they traveled all over the world, did these relatively quote-unquote small projects, half a year to a year. Fast forward, they did Cape to Cairo when the kids now were 19 and a half and 22 or something.
Wow.
And they now were riding themselves. That was one
bikes.
of their last thing they did. And what a cool experience is that?
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. You know, my daughter, I've been a motorcycle rider for much longer than even I've been married, and my since my daughter has been born, I've only ever owned BMWs. So she's very much looking forward to starting her own riding.
Yeah. Are you nervous about that?
I am a little bit nervous, but only because I understand the dangers, and she rides with me usually in our sidecar rig, and I know she knows that motorcycling is different than driving, but I'm a little concerned about it. But
that's good. It's healthy.
When my brother started riding, my youngest brother started riding a few years ago, I encouraged him to come and ride with me. And instead of leading him, I rode behind him to encourage him to set the pace and to encourage him to take the roads that he wanted to take.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about how a new rider behaves. And I was able to give him, from time to time, I'm certainly no expert, but I was able to give him some constructive criticism about, when you're in a curve and the camber changes, this is how you can kind of deal with that. Once you get past the initial surprise of, oh, wow, that feels weird. So I'm hoping to be able to do the same thing with my daughter when she's ready to start riding, and just fall in behind her and follow her wherever she goes and try to have fun with that. Out of curiosity, how many languages do you speak?
Norwegian is still pretty good. English, you hear what you say, and then Spanish, German.
Okay.
So
you can get around pretty well. Certainly, most of the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. I wish I knew some more Chinese. I know a few phrases in Chinese and Mandarin because I'm so much know in that part of the world. It's always, but when you first know a little, it's a little easier the other. And as long as you learn and show initiative, it's amazing how people appreciate. It's a little dangerous though when you start out, because all of a sudden they think you know their language and they're blah, 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 blah. And then no, stop. That's all I know. Period. But it's empowering.
Yeah, that's the difficulty that I have with French and German is I have enough to kind of introduce myself and maybe ask a few questions but past that, I had the opportunity to go to Germany a couple of years ago. I ended up not being able to go, but I got an app on my phone that gave me German lessons. And some of it came back, from when I was a kid, but it was good, I think, practice to get in there. And I think that one of the really important things you can do as a traveler is learn just a little bit of the language, enough to, introduce yourself, say hi, how are you, good night, good morning, where do I find a beer, where do I find a bathroom, those kinds of things. I think people really appreciate the effort. I know as an American, when I meet a traveler who even has trouble with English, I appreciate it when they try. Because I've been there. I grew up in a military family, and I lived in Europe, several different places in Europe. And it wasn't easy to learn German.
No.
It wasn't easy to learn French. I still have trouble with French today. And that's another thing that I really kind of impressed on my daughter, is that the importance of learning another language. I don't care what it is. She decided, she picked Spanish, and I wouldn't call her fluent, but she's got a real facility with it. She picked it up really well. But I think a lot of people are looking at China as a travel destination. And, Chinese is a tough language. There's a lot of inflection issues that can change the meaning of a word.
You can get in deep trouble.
Well, listen, Helge, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking very much forward to learn about your trip into the Himalayas when that happens later this year. So we'll be keeping track of you, and hope to see you at a future rally and get caught up again. And I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and talk.
And enjoy coming here. I've had 2 presentations. That's something I have a big passion for, making multimedia shows. I don't call them seminars because they're more, I use music, video and stuff, and I meet people over again, and it's a good place to be. The BMW MOA is doing a great job, and I've been a member for a long time. I'll be a member for the rest of my life. So thanks you for having me on, Wes.
We're absolutely glad to have you, man. Take it easy.
In addition to thanking Helge for taking time out of his busy schedule for our interview, I want to remind you of some of his company specifics. Globe Riders is on the web at globeriders.com, and they have a 65-day Himalaya expedition coming up later this year. plus an Alaska to Tierra del Fuego expedition that includes a self-guided tour from Alaska to California, then 2 guided stages that will take riders all the way down to the very bottom tip of South America. We hope to have an interview in a future episode with a rider who has been on one of Helge's Asian expeditions, so stay tuned for that. We also need to thank our sponsors, which right now is only the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. I've been a member of the MOA since 1999, and I can tell you from experience they have a lot to offer beyond the camaraderie of the band of BMW riders out there in the world. Even though I ride BMWs, I want to reiterate that Chasing the Horizon is for anybody that loves motorcycles or riding them, so I hope you listeners don't peg us as a BMW-specific podcast. The MOA welcomes riders on all marks, and it's worth checking out the website at bmwmoa.org to see what the club has to offer. One thing that I take advantage of every year is membership in something called MedJet Assist. I sign up for the family plan, and my MOA membership that costs $40 a year gets me a $45 discount with MedJet Assist. So it's worth it for me to do that. It kind of comes out sort of almost even. MedJet Assist is a really cool program if you get sick or hurt, like you're in a crash or something, if you're out on the road. No matter where you're from or where you are, they have domestic and international plans both. If you're 150 miles or more from home and you get admitted to a hospital, then MedJet gets you home. They get you back to a hospital of your choice in the country of your choice, no matter where you are around the world. They can also get your motorcycle home. It costs a little bit extra, another $35 to get the motorcycle transfer protection. But that takes care of your bike too. They also have a thing called MedJet Horizon, which is gives you access to a crisis response center for travel security and crisis problems anywhere around the world, and they get you help as fast as they can. So they have three different levels. They have individual, they have family, and then they have over 75. You get a $45 discount with your MOA membership. You can go to their website, medjetassist.com/BMWMOA, or you can call them at 800-527-7478. They've been a partner with the MOA for a number of years, and it's a fantastic program. I highly recommend it. I'm not trying to put a hard sell down for MOA membership, but because the MOA sponsors this podcast, I want to highlight one member benefit every podcast, every episode, just so that people know what benefits there are to being an MOA member. Now that I've sufficiently pumped the MOA, I want to thank all of you for listening to the debut episode of Chasing the Horizon. I'll be doing my best to put out a new episode every 2 weeks or so, and if you want more information, you can visit the podcast website at bmwmoa.org/podcast. Join us next time when we'll be interviewing Moira Zinn of Power Trip Industries. My name is Wes Fleming, and this has been the first episode of Chasing the Horizon. Andrew Finberg composed and recorded our theme music. Karen Halker designed our logo. Thanks again to Helge Pedersen for this episode's interview, and we'll see you out there somewhere on the road, or off it. Ride safe.